So glad to be joined today by the personal ring announcer, the one and only Jesus Ricardo Rodriguez. Ricardo, welcome to Under the Ring Pro Wrestling Conversations. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Muchas gracias. I know I mentioned it before we came on air. I'm still a little kind of recovering from being under the weather. It's been a rough week, but I'm on the up and up and excited to do this. So let's rock and roll, man.
All right, let's start with what you're doing right now. I understand you're running a wrestling school now called Three Legacies Wrestling in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. What can you tell me about this project and perhaps some of the cards you're putting on in association with it?
Yeah. So for the last year and a half, I started this company here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania called Three Legacies Wrestling. It started off with just the academy, just a school, and then it kind of branched off into doing our own events. And it's been a very good, successful year and a half. We do monthly events. We draw an average 500 people at the events. We had a very large baseball stadium show that we drew about 2,500 people. We had, on that event specifically, we had, Ring of Honor and Impact Star Delirious. We had Fandango, Heath Slater, Rhino, Gene Snitsky, D'Lo Brown, and then of course Ricardo Rodriguez. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of great time that we had, and we're building something that we can be proud of, not just for ourselves, but for potential future pro wrestling stars, but also including our awesome community that has been very very supportive throughout this whole process. So it's one of those where not only do we grow, but we help elevate the students and also the community.
How did it end up happening in Lancaster, Pennsylvania?
So since I left WWE in 2014, 15, and throughout the last several years, I've just been kind of being a nomad and then just kind of opening up or running wrestling schools all over the world. I ended up going to India and I opened up a wrestling school in India under the great Khali. And we had an amazing time over there. We ended up starting the independent scene because there was none prior to my time there. And some of those guys actually eventually got signed to WWE, or Impact or other places. And from there, I went to Australia. Australia, I went to England. England, I did time in Mexico. And then before I ended up here in Lancaster, I was for a whole year, almost a year, in Cairo, Egypt. So I opened up a school in Cairo, Egypt. So I lived over there for a good while, and it was such a beautiful time and experience. Unfortunately, due to COVID, the constant start, stop, it didn't grow as much as I would have wanted it to, but but it was such an awesome experience. And then I ended up back in the U.S. and something that I've been very open about, and what this whole thing has brought up was I fell on hard times with substance abuse. So I ended up going to a rehab center out here in Lancaster for alcohol. And when I got out, I spoke to my now business partner, who's also the owner of the rehab that I went to, and we decided to open this up. Um, and so for the last year and a half, we do a lot of community events. We get involved with the addiction recovery community. We get involved with the homeless shelters. We get involved with the food hubs. So we do a lot of community work that's involved around this. So that's how we're able to help out the community as well. And in return, they support us as well.
Well, congratulations on that, and obviously, it's turning a negative into a positive. It sounds like you're doing well with how you were able to turn things around in Lancaster there.
Yeah, it's been a blessing. I mean, being around the people that are also in recovery helps a lot too. Uh, this it was something that I had been struggling for a while, but I didn't really get even more serious until the COVID times.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of people that fell on hard times as well too during that time frame because there was nothing else to do. Especially with somebody like myself that I mean, I was independent wrestling for years, and that was my main job occupation basically was just constantly traveling. So when COVID happened, everything stopped, everything shut down. So there was nothing to do, or at least in our minds, there was nothing to do.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so I mean, I didn't handle it too well, but I mean, like I said, we were able to turn this around, and I'm thankful that because of Christopher Dreisbach, my partner, um, he's been helping me out with all of this process, and in return, we offer something here with the school that some of our students are also in recovery, um, or if they weren't already, they joined us, and then that kind of keeps them focused. So it kind of keeps them, out of you know all that other like bad negative thoughts that they may have in order to pick up or use or something.
What kind of things did you learn about the different wrestling training around during the course of your career? I know you said you've been to a lot of different places. You've been through a lot of different companies. What unique spin do you think you're able to put on things as a trainer at your own school there?
I learned a lot. Not so I learned a lot also when I was in WWE, because everybody, all the coaches, all the trainers, even though the basic fundamentals were very similar in style, everybody had a different approach and on how to teach something. And then I got to learn from them the concept that everybody learns differently and through at different speeds and through different methods. Some people are auditory, some people are visual, some people you have to constantly repeat again and again and again and again. And then there's other people that you tell them once and they get it. So I had to learn a lot of patience, and especially obviously in a different country where I don't speak the same language. I had to learn patience. I had to learn again that everybody learns differently. So I was able to take what worked with this person, what worked for this person, what worked for this person. This way didn't work with this person, so I had to find alternatives. So now that I have my school and I have people from that are very different, different cultural backgrounds, different mentalities. I know how I was raised and then how I was trained as well. And then it was very, I mean, it was a different mentality back then. It was more so let's just beat them to the ground and hopefully they'll learn. But I know that some people don't respond to that. So I had to learn different methods of how to teach something. But that's also my job to understand, to get an overall idea of how this person reacts and how this person, how can I get the best out of this person? And everybody's different. Everybody's different. So I got to learn that aspect by being all over the place.
I think sometimes people misunderstand the concept of wrestling training. From what I know of it, most people are always kind of learning in every stop that they're at. It kind of made me laugh when Great Khali opened a school in India. A lot of people were like, "Oh, the Great Khali is training people."
Yeah, no, he
Thinking
was
that, like,
never
right, but thinking they're all going to wrestle like him. It's like if you look at some of the trainer wrestler combinations in wrestling history, it's like the Sheik trained Rob Van Dam. I don't think that
there.
is
Right,
exactly he's going to teach him about being a wrestler. He's not necessarily going to be teaching him how to do every single move that he ends up learning along the way. It's more.
right.
I mean, you could probably speak to it better than anybody. You were there in India with Kali, like how that setup worked and what
Yeah, I
kind of
mean,
his involvement was.
Kali was Kali. No, and to you're absolutely right. But I mean, Kali was hardly there. He would just kind of go, show up, and then show face, and then hey, hello, make sure you eat right, listen to the trainer, and then he would go off. And then something else that we can touch a little bit afterwards is how big of a star Kali is, and there's a lot of methods that he would try to teach the guys that I did not agree with, because obviously he was not in the ring. But I can never take away the level of stardom that man has in India. And the only way I could ever compare it to is if you ever saw those old videos of like the Beatles coming off
Yeah,
a plane, that's the only way I can compare it to. And I can say this with full certainty because I have been in cars with him as he's walking outside, and the car just get flooded with people. It's insane. It's insane. It's something to witness in person. Um, but to the other point, yeah, I mean, and again, so my job as a coach is to be able to learn different styles. I was very thankful that in my time in WWE, I got to spend time around the high flyers. I got to spend time around like the technical guys, the aggressive heels, the villains, the heavyweights. So I got to learn from different people and their format, their style. So I can take a little bit from this guy, I can take a little bit from this guy, and then mesh it all together. So then when I go, for instance, in India, and then I did have in India, I had like 3 or 4 that were about Kali's height, roughly. So I'm not gonna teach them the high flying style, obviously, but I have to still be able to guide them and teach them stuff. So I was able to take all my past experiences and apply it to this individual person to make it best fit them.
And then even with some of your experiences too, looking at your career in the WWE, you ended up in a role that was probably completely different from what you were maybe doing in developmental before you ended up, your role as a ring announcer, which is something that, people maybe never thought of before as being a heel role, but you ended up sort of in the Bobby Heenan spot of
Yeah,
you need to wrestle like a manager and manage like a wrestler. And, you
yeah.
were taking all those big spills all the time, outside the ring and everywhere else. So, that shared experience of just, the way that you ended up breaking into WWE has to be pretty helpful for, being able to show people the way.
It, it was very different than what I was used to. Absolutely very different. I had when I first started wrestling, I learned the Mexican lucha libre style. So that's what I was taught. That's what I knew. And eventually, I transitioned over to what we would call the American style. Um, so it was a little different, but all I knew was wrestling, 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 wrestling. So when I got signed to WWE and I got told that I can't wrestle anymore, that I have to be a ring announcer, that was hard at first. And then my story was also very different because when I got signed to WWE, I did a tryout at the Staples Center, whatever it's called now.
Yep.
I got signed on August 10th of 2010. It was the day after SummerSlam. I did a tryout. I got hired. I got offered this spot the next day. I did the spot on SmackDown, and I got hired on the spot. So, and then I got put on the road immediately. So I didn't go to developmental. They just put me with Alberto right away, and it just kind of went from there. It wasn't until maybe like 2 months later I ended up going to Florida, and I went to FCW, and I was very rarely at training because I was already on the road. And then the 2 days that I was at FCW, I was doing promo class with Dusty Rhodes. Uh, and then the Thursday was when they used to have their FCW shows. So I was never at training. So I went backwards in the process.
Interesting.
Um, and but I mean, just letting go of that ego of like I can't wrestle anymore. I have to be a ring announcer. I have to kind of swallow my pride a little bit. That was tough at first, but in hindsight, and obviously we live life uh, backwards sometimes because we learn backwards. Um, but we're expected to experience it and live it like we've already lived it. Um, but I was very thankful that I did have good mentors. Paul Bearer was somebody that was very close to me, and he would guide me through a lot of stuff. And then Mick Foley would kind of pull me aside from time to time and tell me things here and there. Same thing with Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman would sit me aside every now and then and just kind of like tell me, "Hey, this didn't work out. Don't do it this way. Do it this way next time around." Da da da. Right. So I had good folks that were guiding me through the process, and a lot of it too was honestly just learning on the fly and making mistakes and then learning from it. Because obviously we were on TV 5 days, or we were on the road 5 days a week. We were, so I would make mistakes, and it happens. And instead of dwelling on it, we have to learn from it.
What do you think it was that got you signed to WWE? You end up you get this tryout, you end up signed, and you end up being on all these huge shows, WrestleMania, and everything else as Alberto Del Rio's personal ring announcer. What was it about your tryout that opened their eyes, you think?
So when I did my tryout, the man who had gotten me the tryout specifically had originally told me, his name is Jesse Hernandez from Southern California.
Oh yeah.
He's from San Bernardino, and he he had told me that they were looking for luchadors. And at the time, on the Independence, I used to wear a mask and I used to go by the name of Chimera.
Right.
And so I was like, yeah, sure. So I did the tryout. We did a whole bunch of drills. We did this little tournament style matches and stuff. And then they wouldn't pick who won the matches. They would just kind of pick who they liked out of each match to advance them. And at the end, it was myself and this one guy by the name of Mercurio Jr. So we do the match. He wins. Blah blah blah. We're done. Ty Bailey, who was a talent scout at the time, he approached me afterwards, and he asked me if I was under contract anywhere, if given the opportunity, would I be willing to relocate to Florida? And I've been in wrestling long enough at this point where people offer you the world and nothing ever happens. So I was like, yeah, sure, okay, we'll see what happens, right? And then we were in catering afterwards, and they had asked the other kid, who was this clean cut, good looking kid, right? He was younger than I was, but he was clean cut. And they had asked him, he was the Mercury Jr. guy without the mask. They had asked him if he wanted to do this thing on SmackDown the next day. For whatever reason, he said he couldn't make it. Excuse me. For whatever reason, he said he couldn't make it the next day. So then Jesse goes, well, he speaks Spanish. So then they come up to me, they approach me, and they had asked me if I was willing to go to SmackDown the next day in San Bernardino. Oh, yeah, I'm from Los Angeles originally. Hello. So I ended up going to San Bernardino. I did this re-announcing deal. It was the first time I met Alberto, first time I actually meet Vince. And it just went from there. It just kind of happened from there. Vince liked it. And then it was from what Malenko used to tell me, because Malenko was our main producer agent, and he was like my wrestling dad in WWE. So from what Malenko had told me was that it was supposed to be only for the Alberto debut. So that Ricardo role was only supposed to be a one-off, but Vince liked it a lot, and then they decided to keep me around, and it just went from there. I got to experience a lot of awesome times in WWE, WrestleManias, traveling the world. I mean, I got to perform in Madison Square Garden with Alberto being heavyweight champ 2 times and then WWE champ twice. So we got to hold those titles. And it was all because that one guy had said that he couldn't make it the next day.
And you showed up and you hit a home run. You probably a grand slam right out of the gate, and they kept you around. So, like, then you're a ring announcer. Who do you most want to sound like when you're doing ring announcing? Do you end up having a kinship with the other ring announcers, like Howard Finkel, Tony Schimmel, and those guys? And what do they all think of you?
So I think I was, obviously my style was a lot different. When I did my tryout, the rehearsal for the first time that we did the thing with Alberto, I went in very proper because I figured ring announcer. So I figured, Howard Finkel, Justin Roberts. And then, so I went very proper and very ladies and gentlemen, right? And I've never done ring announcing before. So I'm just making this up as I go. And then Vince goes, he's like, no, don't do that. Be more animated, be more Hispanic. And then I'm thinking to myself, I was like, I don't know what that means, but okay. But then I remember the ring announcers from down in Mexico, down in AAA, and they were very, loud and this and this. I was like, okay, maybe that's what he wants. So then I started to become more animated and louder, like a hype man. So that's kind of how I took it, and then it just went from there. And the long Alberto didn't come in until a little bit later. There was this, and I've tweeted this. I tweeted this to him before. There's this soccer commentator from Argentina, and his name is Andres Cantor. Yep. Andres Cantor. And it wasn't until Andres, because I'm Mexican, so I used to grow up watching soccer, right? Especially, and then so I would listen to Andres Cantor, goal, right? So that's where the Alberto thing started coming in, and then I didn't start elongating it until the WWE Twitter folks started counting it, and then posting it on Twitter. So then when I realized that they were counting it, I was like, cool, let me see how long I can go. And it's just where I progressively got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then the audience started doing it with me, and it just went from there.
And I can tell you personally that the contour thing can be a heel maneuver too, because I once covered. I was a sports reporter for 10 years, and I once covered a soccer tournament, and the person that was on the PA decided to do the long goal call every time somebody scored. But there were 3 goals inside of 6 minutes that this one team scored. So somebody from the other team came up to the press box and was like, they stormed in. They said, "You are very annoying," and they were like, "You're not allowed to be in the press box here." So, it was actually a pretty funny moment, but but it was
was because of Andres Cantor.
Yeah, they were just doing they were doing that whole,
Yeah,
it was just yeah, it was obnoxious in that moment too. So,
yeah, 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 yeah.
but how many tuxedos did you buy?
Oh man, so funny story. So the very first one that I had, well, no, I'm lying. The very first one was a cheap one that I had gotten from because I mean I didn't grow up with a lot, and so when I did my tryout, I went to Goodwill and I bought a cheap suit, and there was a bridal store across the street that I bought a couple of bow ties from. So that was my very first one, and so it was like $10 for the whole thing, right? But then once I started really getting on the road, I was like, man, I want to look nice and proper because I'm WWE now. So the very first actual suit that I bought was like around $600, right? I was very proud of it because I've never, I don't, yeah, it was the first time I ever bought something expensive. Um, and it only lasted like a month because maybe a month, if that, because we did a pay per view. It was Alberto and then Edge, and they wanted to do a spot where they're jaw jacking back and forth, and then Edge goes and he grabs my sleeve and then rips it off.
Oh man.
Um, so they had to jimmy it, they had to rig it so it'll rip off. And then I remember when they're cutting it in the back, I had this like my heart was breaking because I never had bought anything that expensive. Um, and my heart was breaking, and then from there I got sad. So I ended up so after that I realized after all right they're gonna keep beating me up, um, and so I just kept going to like Burlington Coat Factory and just getting my suits from there.
Nice, nice. Frequent customer there at
Yeah,
Burlington.
yeah.
What did you think at Survivor Series? I think it was at MSG when CM Punk goes out and brings Howard Finkel in his personal ring announcer. What was that moment like?
We had an awesome relationship with Howard, and then if you ever talked to anybody who knew him, he was such a kind heart. He was such a nice guy. And if you see that footage of that night, you can see when he walks out and the crowd is chanting his name, and you can see that he's embracing the moment. Obviously, as it was happening, I thought it was cool. But from far away, I can't see his face that clear because we're far away.
Right.
It wasn't until we saw the footage that you can see Howard just he's soaking it in, and then how much he missed it. It was such a beautiful moment. We could have done without the commentary that they were making fun of him,
Yeah.
but it was such an awesome moment. Madison Square Garden, and then that match too was actually what started CM Punk's 400 and whatever day reign it was.
Right.
But it was that match, and again, MSG, Alberto, myself, Punk, Howard. I was such a cool experience, and just to share that with Howard was pretty cool.
I mean, he's as far as ring announcers go, like, and it's unfortunate for anybody who had ever had to follow him, but like,
Yeah, absolutely.
I think he's the absolute best ever, and I'm not even sure anybody else is ever going to come close to what he
Yeah,
did.
his voice is iconic. Yeah, his voice is one of a kind, and my heart will always go towards Howard. We get because when I do podcasts, they'll ask me about like top ring announcers, and and everybody's great, not to take away from anybody else, but Howard is Howard.
Yeah.
Same thing with managing. I get asked about that. Like one of the questions I get asked is like, where would I rank myself? I was like, I don't know, but I'll always go Heyman. Heyman to me is like top when it comes to managing. Um, Especially with the way he taught. I don't know, but Howard was one of a kind.
Yeah, but it's all how you put your different spin on it, though, too. And rankings are great, and people like talking about them, people like debating them, but like,
Subjective opinion, so
you don't
it's
you don't need to try to pass Howard Finkel or Paul Heyman or Bobby Heenan. Like
yeah, yeah,
they've made their way already. You got to find out
absolutely.
who you are yourself. What's your relationship like with Alberto? What was it like, and what is it like today? I know sometimes he's a lightning rod for controversy, and
Yeah.
there's different charges and allegations against him at different times over the years. But what was it like, and what's it like now?
So I mean, I didn't know Alberto until we did that rehearsal. I knew of him because again I grew up watching lucha libre, and then I first started training in Mexican lucha libre, so I was very aware of the Dos Caras family, Mil Máscaras, Psicodélico. I was very aware of that family. Um, when I first met Alberto, he came out. He didn't have this mask on, but I had not been watching WWE at the time because of my work, so it was in training. so I wasn't too up to date on what was going on. So I didn't know about the promos. So I had a friend who was a very hardcore insider wrestling fan, Mark, right? So when I was told what I was doing, I texted him and I was like, "Hey, who's this Alberto Del Rio guy? I just want to know who he is." And then he goes like, "That's Dos Caras Jr." I was like, "What? No way!" So then I started like, I was like, "Oh, cool." And then so I kind of clicked, and then I fanboyed for a little bit because again, I grew up watching Lucha Libre, so I was very aware of him and his whole family. I mean, Máscaras, Dos Caras Senior. So that was kind of cool. And then it took a bit to kind of warm up because I was just a new kid there. I didn't know any better, and then but once we got together, we were inseparable, and I think that's what also kind of helped our chemistry. Um, I would like to think, and this is maybe just me blowing smoke up my tush, uh, that a combination like what we had hasn't been matched yet. Um, and then the reason why I say that is because I I wasn't just the ring announcer. I mean, as far as like the managing, there was times, and I know we're going into like we're going back to curtain on this one, but I would get with the agent, and we would put the match together, and then we would go tell them afterwards, or I would just tell them as the match is happening. So myself and the agent will put the match together because either Alberto or let's say Cena, right? Alberto or Cena were doing interviews or they were doing promos, so then they don't have time for the match. So we would call it, and then I would go and I would tell Alberto because they didn't have time to get together and then put it together. So I would tell Cena or I would tell Alberto what myself and the agent had just put together. And then as the match is happening, I'm calling it to them as we're doing it. So if you ever see me running back and forth in the back, it's because I'm calling it to them.
Wow.
So yeah, yeah. There were so many times too, and then I just remember specifically there was a couple of times where when he was with Dolph, where they because again they had so much stuff going on with the promos, so they wouldn't have much time to call everything in the match. They would just call like the big spots. So Dolph would look back and then he would just kind of give me like a "What's next?" and I would just go "Bah, bah, bah," and then they would just keep going from there.
And another one of the unique things you were able to do in your career too was commentary.
Mm.
Again, at a pretty young age too. So, what kind of comfort did you have doing the Spanish language commentary? Would you
I
feel like?
hated it at first. I hated it at first. I wanted to wrestle, right? That was my ultimate. I wanted to wrestle, and then, um, but yeah. So it took me a while too, and then it's weird. And then if you ever speak to anybody who's bilingual, um, they'll kind of tell you they'll tell you something similar in that there's times I forget Spanish and there's times I forget English. Because my brain has to think twice sometimes, especially when but it's weird though because if I'm speaking to somebody who's also multilingual like I am, I can jump back and forth without missing a beat. But if I have to focus on one, sometimes I forget what's the word for this, and I'll like Americanize it or I'll Spanishnize it. um, and it's weird though. It's weird. But if I'm speaking with somebody who like with Alberto, I can go Spanglish with them, and then I without missing a beat. Um, or but when I speak to them just in Spanish the whole time, sometimes I forget certain words in Spanish, which is weird because otherwise I know it, but for whatever reason. But anyways, but if it wasn't for somebody's like a great guide, because Carlos Cabrera was the main lead announcer, so I learned so much on how to guide and how to be the lead commentator. Um, we didn't have anybody in our earpiece. He did. So it was myself, Carlos, and then Marcelo Rodriguez on the other end. So we didn't. The only person who had somebody in the ear was Carlos, and so he would tap us as we were talking. He would tap us to let us know when to talk or when to slow it down or when to like shut up. Uh, a good example that I learned from him was the because I got to commentate all of WrestleMania 30,
Right.
and that was when Brock beat Taker.
Yep.
And that was such a surreal moment. Such a surreal moment. I don't think anybody expected that, and I didn't at least. And when Taker lost, I legit thought that Taker forgot to kick out. Um, so everything went quiet, and it didn't help either that they didn't play Brock's music right away, which
Yep.
is an awesome note too. They didn't play Brock's music right away. It was quiet. It was super quiet, and if you were there, uh, that big arena that was just filled with roars and sounds, and then cheers and boos got quiet, silent, and it was so awesome. And anyways, so there's this point where I guess once the disbelief kind of started wearing down, I was about to say something, and then I guess Carlos heard my before I was about to speak, and he just grabs my hand and he's like,
Just lay out.
"So, yeah, just let it." But he was very calm about it, so which led me to believe I was like, "You knew, you knew."
The referee did an awesome. Chad Patton did an awesome
Oh
job
yeah,
in that match too, because when you consider what that was, that moment, he had to hit it
yeah.
perfectly, and he did. Who would be in? Who would be producing announcers in Carlos's year for Spanish?
Well, I mean, obviously he's bilingual, so I don't know if he was still here.
Oh, would he
The
hear what Cole would too necessarily?
I don't know if he would hear Cole. I think he would probably hear the who's ever running it in the back with
Oh,
Kevin
okay.
or Vince or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I never would have thought of that of the
yeah,
Spanish announce team having a producer, but it makes sense that somebody would have to be giving them, cues and
yeah, and
everything
yeah,
else.
I'm sure he would have. Yeah, I'm sure he would have somebody in the back telling him, and I would imagine it's the same whoever was on because even when I did English commentary, I didn't have anybody. No, I'm lying. I'm lying. I did. I would hear what they would hear too, what like Cole and the other person would hear. More in my case, because I did English commentary for main event.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
And that was me, Josh Matthews, and Miz sometimes. Um, no, I did. I don't remember. I
That
don't remember.
sounds that sounds right, but
No, I don't remember if I had somebody in my ear. I don't remember because I do remember that one time Miz said something and he got the date wrong. It was something simple, right? Or
yeah.
like the show wrong. Like he was referencing an old event, and I corrected him. And I remember when I got to the back, they told me like never correct Miz. I was like, what? But it wasn't anything crazy or whatever. It was like I think he forget what the date. I don't remember the exact detail. Let's just say, for example, he said like Hell in a Cell '97. I was like, no, it was '98, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Something stupid like that. But I remember I got to the back and like never correct Miz.
Just
I was like,
just let
okay,
it roll.
yeah. I was like, okay. But I don't remember if I had somebody in my ear or it was afterwards.
Yeah.
Either
Interesting.
way,
So we're going to move on to something we call the 3 count now. It's going to be 3 quick questions and your answers. So if you had to book Ricardo Rodriguez in a match versus another manager or second from sometime in history, that would actually be a good match, what would you pick?
oh man, oh jeez. Uh, oh man, you put me in a spot there. I mean,
There's no wrong answers.
Younger Heenan.
Younger Heenan was something. Like some of the bumps that he would
Yeah.
take were insane. Like people
Oh yeah.
don't people forget how good he was as a performer, just physically too.
Yes, sir. He was.
Did you ever have a chance to meet him?
I think I did like at a few conventions
Yeah,
throughout the years.
cool. Second question: what is your favorite lucha libre mask?
Ultimo Dragon is up there, definitely.
Yeah,
And I got to wrestle Ultimo Dragon a little over a year ago. So that was like a dream come true.
wow, that's great. And then last question: it's sort of related to all the stuff we were talking about a little bit, but aside from Ricardo Rodriguez, who are your favorite ring announcers?
Chimmel. Chimmel for a lot of reasons. Um, yeah, I mean the rated R superstar. Chimmel, and then I love what Samantha Irving's doing. She's awesome.
She's
Um,
different.
so yeah, she is the energy that she brings. She's great. I'll always have a soft spot for Justin Roberts because he's a good friend of mine.
Mhm.
I love that dude, and yeah, we got along super well in my time in WWE. And then he's actually one of the guys that when I got to spend a lot of time with AEW, I mean, it just reconnected. And it was like we hadn't missed a beat.
I went to a show one time that Tony Chimmel was announcing in Poughkeepsie, New York. I live in Poughkeepsie, New York, and the fans started chanting for him, and his response on the mic was, "Sometimes I do my job, and sometimes I do it stupid." What is he talking about? I was like, I don't know if he had ever done that at any other shows, but I'm like, I was expecting something a little bit better than that. I was like, why did he say that? But
Chimmel's fun, man. Yeah.
I should get him on for this at some point. I think he'd have a lot of fun stories. But Ricardo Rodriguez, thank you so much for joining me today. 3 Legacies Wrestling in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. How can people find out some more information on that?
You can always go to 3 Legacies Wrestling. It's typed out 3. So THREE. 3 Legacies Wrestling on Facebook. Check out our website, 3legaceswrestling.com. Also on YouTube. Follow our YouTube. Subscribe, please. On all the social medias. It's pretty easy to find out. Or you can just follow me, and then because I tag 3 Legacies on everything on Twitter, X. So just check out 3 Legacies Wrestling. We have an event coming up next Saturday, on the 20th, as we come into 2024, called Icebreaker from Millersville University.
What do you have in February? This is actually going to be recorded a little bit before. It's going to come out after what you were just saying. So
all right, that's fine. That's totally fine. You can check out. Just follow us on social media, on our website at 3legaceswrestling.com. Check us out on Facebook, 3 Legacies Wrestling, and then on YouTube, 3 Legacies Wrestling as well.
All right. Thank you so much for doing this. Really enjoyed this. A lot of fun. Good luck with everything you're doing.